Hi everybody, I'm going to show you how to create this paint app. So it's really straightforward. It's just got some buttons for selecting the color. If you select a color, you can draw using that color. And you can also create dots, big dots and small dots. And you can erase with the wipe button. That's all it really does. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to create a new project by clicking Projects, Start New Project. I'll give it a name, my last name, and then underscore paint. I'm not using spaces because App Inventor doesn't allow spaces. I actually already created a project with this name. I'm just going to cancel that and open it, but you should create a new one. Alright, so first thing I'm going to do is show you how to set up the design window. So you might have noticed that there were a whole bunch of horizontally arranged buttons. So here's the thing, if I try to just take a bunch of buttons and place them, they stack vertically, not horizontally. Like I can't just place things side by side. They just kind of, the default behavior is to stack vertically. So what I'm going to have to do instead, I'll get my 3 buttons, but I'm going to have to put them in some kind of horizontal container. So I'll need, in order to do that, I'm going to go down to this tab here, Layout, and Layout has some containers that you can put your app components in. So in this case, I want a horizontal arrangement. Right? So arrange things horizontally. So I'll put text for button 1, text for button 2, or button 1, button 2, button 3, inside there. And right now they're currently just called button 1, button 2, button 3. I'm going to rename them. So button 1, I will rename button red. And I'm going to use this naming convention where I use the type of thing that it is, followed by a description of it. That's going to be really useful later when you go over to the code window, because you're going to need to know what each item is, like what kind of item it is, based on its name. And you're going to need to know like what its role is depending on the name. So a name that includes what type of object it is and what its purpose is really helpful, because it'll help you understand what you're supposed to do with it in the code. So I've got my red, blue, and green buttons. I'm going to also update the text for each one. So button red, I'll set the text to red. Blue, I'll set the text to blue. Green, set the text to green. Now I'll move on to the canvas, which is that area that you could actually draw on. So that's back in the user interface tab. I believe, is that user? No, it's not user interface. It is something. It is drawing, I believe. Yeah, drawing. So what the canvas is it's just an interactive surface. Specifically, you can draw on it, and you can have objects that are animated on it, which is really helpful for all kinds of different interactive apps. But another thing that's really nice is that it's touch sensitive. So if you're trying to interact with some sort of app or game where you want to be able to swipe things around or move things around by touching and dragging, for example, a canvas is a good way to accomplish that. And you'll see one way that you can actually have it sense swiping in this app. So right now the canvas is just small. I'm going to leave the name canvas 1 because it's the only canvas. I don't need to add any additional description. But the height and width are not really good. It's too small. I'm going to set the height to, let's try 300 pixels. Yeah, 300 pixels I think should be okay. Is that enough room? I'm going to shrink it just a little bit. I'll go with 250. And then the width, how about 300 for that? And that's fine. Width I might even be able to fill. Let's see how that works. Yeah, fill is fine for width. I can't fill the height because I still need to put some buttons at the bottom. At least not yet. I might change it to fill later after I've placed some more buttons. But I do need to have those extra buttons. So back in layout, I'll get another horizontal arrangement. From user interface, I'll get 3 more buttons. And just like before, rename them. And the other functions that this app needs to have are wipe, big dots. I'm going to rename that. Really shouldn't be putting spaces and things. Hold on. Yeah, I should be following my own naming conventions. I'm going to say button, big dots. I'm going to go back to wipe, rename that button wipe. And then button small dots. And just like before, I'll add text. In this case, you can add spaces. Actual text can have spaces, so big space dots is fine. It's just in the name of the button. That's part of the code, and it's probably not a good idea to have object names include a space. I think it automatically inserted an underscore because it just wouldn't work. You can't have spaces in object names in App Inventor. All right, so you're starting to see I actually do have a little bit of space at the bottom. I think I might go back. Let's see what happens if I just change the canvas to fill. So fill parent just means it's going to fill the parent container. In other words, whatever the bigger container is, in this case, the whole screen, it's just going to fill up any remaining space. So sometimes that's a useful way to fill some space. So that's just what I did, as I filled the rest of the space. So now the canvas takes up every space that isn't taken up by buttons. So now over in the blocks window, let's add some code to make this functional. So let's see. Some of the things that the buttons do are really simple. So for example, the red, blue, and green buttons really just do one really simple thing. They set a color. So this is something that you're going to need, that you'll probably get really accustomed to using, is a control block. A control block for an object. So if I go to a button like button red, you'll see that there are these when blocks. These are sort of events for when something happens. So like when the button is clicked, or when got focus means like when you click inside a text box. Long click is what it sounds like. So there's all these different like ways that you can interact with different objects, and different objects have different sensing available to them. So in this case, it's just a click. Click is straightforward. When button red is clicked, what it's going to do is it's going to set the paint color to red, and that paint color is actually built in. So I do kind of want to point out that where I'm getting all this stuff from is there are kind of two different sections. There are the built-in blocks that are just part of App Inventor, like basic controls, basic logic, basic math, etc. All of these things, they are just built in, right? So it's like if statements and loops. Logic is logic. Math has to do with math. Text has to do with manipulating text. Lists, that's a certain type of, it's a certain way of organizing data that we'll talk about later. Dictionaries, another way of organizing data. Colors is just a bunch of colors. And variables we'll get to later. And procedures, something we'll also get to later. Not going to get too much detail about what those do, but just keep in mind these are all built in. On the other hand, these are things that you create. So there's this whole extra section down here. These are individual blocks, individual component blocks. So for example, the blocks under button red only apply to button red, at least as they're set up. You can actually change them really easily. So what I did was I chose when button red click, if I duplicate, I don't want to add a comment, remove comment. When I duplicate this, I can actually just click the drop box and change that to button green. Keep that in mind, that duplication is possible, because it can really come in handy and make things easy sometimes. Just right click on a block and click duplicate. So I've got a when clicked for button red, button green, and button blue. What do I want it to do? I just want to do something to the canvas, actually. I want to set the canvas's paint color. Because canvas has built-in features related to painting, drawing, animation, that kind of stuff. There's a bunch of built-in functions and a bunch of built-in properties. So one of those properties is paint color. I'm going to find paint color among these green blocks. And here's paint color. You'll notice there's two different options. One is just canvas.paintColor, and the other one is set canvas.paintColor. So this one, the one that doesn't say set, that is to look up what the paint color is. It's like to get the paint color. And so if you want to use the paint color, you would choose this. If you want to use the paint color to like do something like with it somehow, this is what you would use. But that's not what I want. Just kind of went away. Let me get that back. Paint color. What I want to do is set. Because think about it, the button is setting the color. That's what it does. So I'm going to snap that in there. And I want to set paint color to, in this case, red. So pretty straightforward. It's in colors. I'm going to go back to my built-ins and go to colors, and that is red. I can just duplicate this a couple times and change my color just by clicking on the box, actually. So green, I'll set to green. And blue, I'll set to blue. All right, so those are some of the more straightforward blocks. Let's see. What else? What would be another? What would be the most logical thing to do next? I guess would be to use the paint color. So, use the paint. The thing I want to do with that is I want when you drag your finger across the canvas, I want it to draw. So I'm gonna go back to my canvas, and there should be under the canvas. There should be a way to sense dragging, and in fact there is. So it's like, it's just it's actually the first option. It's right there. So when canvas dot dragged, that just means when the canvas is dragged. So you'll notice that it uses this dot notation all the time. That's really common in programming languages. that have objects, and then the objects have their own properties, or the objects have their own functions attached to them. And that is what we've got here. We've got an object like a canvas or a button, and then that object can have properties like paint color. So it's object dot property, canvas dot paint color, or it can have a function attached to it as well. So when canvas dot dragged, that is when this event happens, when it senses a drag across, when it senses a finger touching the screen and moving across it, it's going to generate a whole bunch of data from that, and it's going to put that data in these little boxes. So the start of the drag, on the x coordinate. So you have to kind of imagine the whole screen has XY coordinates. It's not quite what you think, though. You might be thinking, just like math class, right? Nope, it's not. The way computers tend to handle it, and I'll show you an example. App Inventor. I'll just say coordinates. Find a good example, hopefully. Here we go. So here's an example. Instead of being sort of traditional coordinates that you might be used to from math class, it starts you in the top left at 0, 0, and the numbers going down are positive. The numbers going to the right are positive, like normal, but the numbers going down are positive. So this actually is like less helpful than I thought it would be. Let me see if I can find a better one. Yeah, here's a good one. So like here on the left is like, you know, what you'd be more used to in math class, where you've got 0, 0 in the top left. Going, you know, that would be like quadrant 4 in like a normal coordinate plane. If you're going down along the y-axis, it becomes a greater negative number, right? So not greater, it becomes literally a smaller number, but more negative, right? You go like -1, -2, -3. So that's kind of different from the App Inventor system in the sense that the numbers stay positive. It's still 1, 2, 3 as you go down, but it's not negative. So the numbers are just actually bigger. So it's a little bit different. It might take a little bit of getting used to as you go from left to right. That's kind of same as ordinary traditional coordinate systems. Left to right, x increases, but going from top to bottom, y actually increases. It doesn't decrease. So that's something to keep in mind when working with that coordinate system. So you got your starting x value and your starting y value of the swipe. You got an actual in sort of a sequence, because what it'll do is it'll generate a sequence of points. Like as you're dragging across, it'll be like tracking where your finger goes, so it can identify at an exact moment what was the previous x and the previous y, or the current x and current y at any point during the swipe. So those are all the things that we might need to be concerned with at this moment, because we're not using sprites. Sprites are like movable objects, and dragged any sprite is just like it's a true-false value. It's like if a sprite was dragged, but we're not dealing with that right now. All we really need right now is the previous and current thing. We're also going to need to call a function. So that is something else attached to the canvas. Go to the canvas, scroll down. There should be something that says call canvas.drawLine. It's this thing. So it says call because it's calling a function. Remember I talked about these objects can have like properties attached to them, like the paint color, or they can have functions attached to them, which are like things that they do. Well, the canvas has a function called drawLine. It can draw a line. In programming, using a function is calling it. It's just the terminology for when you use a function. So call canvas1.drawLine means use the function drawLine that is attached to the canvas. And when you do that, it needs you to tell it where to draw. So we're going to tell it where to draw by using the data we got from the swipe. So we want the start point of the line to be the previous X and Y. So hover your mouse over the previous X and click and drag this get previous X. And that's how you get the X in there. Same with the previous Y. And it's going to go from the previous X and Y to the current X and Y. And so as you're swiping, it keeps constantly sensing that swipe, that finger drag across the screen, and it keeps connecting previous Y to current Y, previous X to current X with these lines. Then, what else should we add to this? So that by itself should have you just drawing lines. So you could actually go ahead and test that out if you want. You won't be able to clear the screen yet. Maybe that's the next thing we should do. You can go ahead and test that out. You should be able to draw lines. The next thing I'm going to do is set it up so that you can, in fact, clear the screen. So I'm just going to get another when button click. I'm just going to duplicate and change this to button wipe and get rid of this because none of that's useful. So I've got when button wipe is clicked, it's going to wipe the screen. That is also a canvas thing, right? Because all this drawing stuff is happening on the canvas. So I go back to my canvas and I'm going to call a function. This should be something like clear. There it is. Call canvas1.clear. That's going to clear my canvas. It's going to get rid of everything on it. That's all that needs to go there. And then the last thing that we need to be able to do is draw those dots. So to draw dots, it would be nice. Remember, we had a big dot and a small dot. Well, we're going to need to control that dot size somehow. So the way we're going to control the dot size is with something called a variable. If you've used Scratch before, you're probably already familiar with variables if you've done any other programming. But a variable is just a storage container for data. Right? So it's like a place in the computer's memory where you can put data so you can access it later. And in this case, what we want to store for later is the dot size. So I'm going to go to variables. This is in my built-in section. And under variables, I'm going to find this initialize global. And it says name because you have to name the variable that you're initializing. It can be a little bit confusing. So why does it say, first of all, why does it say initialize? That just means like create the variable. So you have to create the variable. That's just the term for creating it. Global means it's available everywhere in the program. So you can have variables that are not global. Here's some examples over here. Start X, start Y, previous X, previous Y. Those are not global. Those are only available inside this when canvas thing. They're local. So it's global versus local. So these local variables are only available in here. This global variable is going to be available everywhere. And it's going to be called dot size. And all I'm going to put in there is a number. I'm going to show you another technique that might be useful. For any block, actually, if you don't like using this blocks list, you can actually just start typing and it'll kind of show up. So, for example, if I want to type a number, if I just type 2, I want the thing to be a 2 pixel width dot, and hit enter, the block 2 just shows up. And I can replace this 2 with other numbers. I can call it like 8 or 10 or whatever, but I'm just going to set it to 2 for now. And I could do that with other blocks as well. So, maybe there's another block that I want. For example, I want another one of those when clicked blocks for the big button and the small button. Well, I can say when. And you'll notice I have a whole bunch of options. So what am I looking for? Big dots dot click. That's one that I need. So I click on that, and I think I lost it. Hold on. When. I'm going to select it with my selection arrows maybe, and then hit enter. Yeah, and it shows up. So I just had to use the arrow keys. I tried clicking on it. It didn't work. I had to use the arrow keys to select from that list and then hit enter. So if you prefer, you can actually look things up that way instead of using the blocks list. So I've got big button, big dots. I also need one for button, small dots. And when each of those buttons gets clicked, what I want to do is I want to set that dot size. So depending on which one it is, the dot size will be different. So I'm going back to my variables tab. I'm going to get a set block because this is going to set a variable. Set and set. And the thing I want to set is that global variable dot size. And I'm just going to duplicate a couple numbers. And small dots can stay at 2. However, big dots, I want bigger, so I'm going to say 8. Right. So now when the button big dots is clicked, it sets the dot size global variable to 8. When small dots is clicked, that sets the dot size to 2. I think we're almost done here. We are able to set the dot size at the beginning of the program. We can reset the dot size, big or small. All we need to do is actually draw the dots. And so instead of drag, it'll just be if you tap on the screen, it'll draw a dot. So go back to Canvas. When canvas.touched, I'm going to get another, just like last time, one of those purple blocks that calls a function, and I'm going to find that in Canvas again, and this instead will be draw a circle instead of draw a line. The center of the circle, the center X is just going to be the X where you clicked, right? The X that gets generated by this touch event. Same thing with Y. Center Y will be wherever you clicked. And radius is just the width of the circle. That will be that global variable that we were working with. So get global dot size. And so now this fill equals true. That just means is the circle filled in? If you really want an empty circle, like a donut, or just literally draw a drawn circle instead of a dot, I guess you could do that. But it won't really look like a dot. It'll look like you drew a circle and didn't fill it in. So I'm gonna leave fill set to true, and that should do it. That should include all of the features that are in this app.